Greetings, ladies and gentlefish, and welcome to the review of the T29 American Tier 7 Heavy Tank. History lesson time. So, it's a popularly held misconception, I think it's popular anyway, that the only tank the Americans ever really sent to the Second World War was the Sherman, with some tank destroyers like the Hellcat and the Wolverine, etc. But basically they just did the Sherman. This is wrong. One of the obvious ways in which it's wrong was the introduction toward the end of the war of the M26 Pershing. Now remember, the Pershing was originally designated a heavy tank and designed to do something about the Tiger, as many tanks were. Tiger/Panther. However, with the advent of the German King Tiger, Tiger II, Queen Tiger, Bengal Tiger, call it whatever you will, the Americans decided that the M26 Pershing just wasn't really beefy enough for the job. And so, they took the chassis of an M26 Pershing, lengthened it, gave it a sodding great big turret on top, and poked a 105mm high-velocity gun out the front of the turret, and created the T29, which is this machine. Now interestingly, in-game, of course, this is at Tier 7, despite the fact that it was designed to counter the Tiger II, which is at Tier 8, but never mind. In real life, the T29, the T30 and the T34, you can see the common numbering system there, were all actually variations on the same machine. It was basically the T29 but with differing guns poking out the front. So the T29 mounted a 105mm gun, the T30 mounted a 155mm gun, and then the final evolution of the concept, the T34, mounted a 120mm gun. But here we are in game. Sorry, I should actually quickly finish by saying, in the Advent, the war was over before this thing could do anything. The design started in 1944. It was ready in something like it might have just been in time actually for the Pacific campaign, but in the event, it never actually saw service. The T29 was never put into operation. So that's the history. What is it that you get in game? Well, to kick off with, 1,250 hit points, which is very average for a Tier 7 heavy tank. At the top end of that sort of spectrum, you have tanks like the Tiger with 1,500, and toward the bottom end, you've got like the AMX M445, which has 1,200. The IS and the T29 are kind of stuck in the middle at around 1,250. IS2 as well, 1,280 or something like that. So 1,250 is pretty much par for the course. It's a heavy old beast though, mine weighing in at 65.3 tons, and an 800 horsepower engine, and it means this tank can be a little bit sluggish, though it does have a top speed of 35 kilometers per hour, which isn't too shabby. The traverse speeds of 25 and 26 are okay, but when you include the ground resistance, it does make the T29 feel rather sluggish. I'll talk more about the armour in some detail in a bit, but just to mention at the moment, the hull armour is 102 on the front, 76 on the sides, and 51 on the rear, which is not great, but it's worth noting the frontal hull is still better than the Tiger's, and it's sloped. And the turret is 102 on the back, 127 on the sides, and 279 on the front. This number is a little bit of a misnomer. There's a very small patch of 279 armour on this turret in reality. It's not the whole turret front, but the fact remains that this is a hull-down monster. The front of the turret on this thing is armoured like Fort Knox. When a bank robbery is due, it is ridiculous. I'll talk more about the gun in just a second. 380 meter view range for a Tier 7 heavy tank is pretty respectable, and 745 meter signal range is good, but no one ever gets excited about radios. Unless you're into that sort of thing. So, okay, I guess we should probably talk about the gun, or rather, the guns. There are 3 guns on this tank, but if you have any common sense, you will only ever use 2 of them. Let's start off with the gun that you will never use. Technically, the stock gun on this tank is the 76mm M1A2. This is the same gun that you use on the Easy 8 Sherman. It's the same gun that you use on a whole bunch of different tanks. It's the stock gun on this tank, but if you've got any common sense, you will never use it, because this gun, the 90mm gun M3, can be unlocked at Tier 6. So you can already have this available on this tank. I will talk about this in more detail later. This gun is not horrific and actually has more DPM than the top gun on this machine, but the alpha damage and the penetration let it down a bit. If you're willing to fire a respectable amount of premium ammunition, the 160 pen can be compensated for. 240 alpha damage is alright. 0.38 dispersion is not very good. 2.3 second aim time is nice though. If you're willing to fire that APCR, you can pump out quite a lot of DPM from this gun, but in reality this is a grinding gun. You're not going to use this any longer than you have to, because you're going to use the moneymaker gun, the gun the T29 was supposed to have, the 105mm gun T5E1. So this should get you excited, because it's the first time on an American tank you'll be mounting a 105. 5.26 rate of fire. It's alright. 198 penetration, so that's fractionally less than the Tiger, less than the M4, AMX M445, sorry, that is, but higher than the IS, the IS2, the KV3, the Black Prince. That goes up to 245 with APCR, although I'm not sure if I've ever actually fired a single round of APCR out this gun. 53 for HE, 320 alpha damage, which is pretty much standard for a 105mm gun that comes mounted on a tier 7 or 8 tank. 420 alpha damage with high explosive. Now the accuracy of this gun is utter garbage at 0.42. I mean, it's seriously bad. That makes aiming for weak spots at any sort of range difficult. In fact, that means taking shots at long range with this gun is decidedly dodgy. This is really a short to mid-range fighter. 2.3 second aim time though is actually pretty nice on a heavy tank, and does this gun and this tank credit. And this is the money maker on this gun, and I can talk about various different stats of this gun and theory craft it all day, but the fact remains that it's a pretty tasty weapon. So that's the firepower. This thing is fairly well endowed in the firepower department. It is fairly well endowed in the armour department, although as I say, we will talk about that a bit more in some detail later. So, what about the grind? Here's an interesting point. There are two different ways to get to the T29. Either way, you go through the T2 and the M2 mediums, which you won't take long to get through, and they're alright, but nothing to get too excited about. You then have to play the turd on tracks known as the M3 Lee. Historically, this tank was a stopgap. It was an interim solution, and in-game it's not very good. And from there, you can either go to the M4 or the T1. Either of these routes will take you to the T29, but there's a caveat in place. So, you can go the M4, then the Jumbo, the M4A3E2, Sherman Jumbo, and then down to the T29. Or you can go the T1 Heavy, M6, and then the T29. A lot of people choose the former. They choose to take the Sherman route, which is fine, because they seem to But they seem to perceive that the T1 Heavy and the M6 are bad tanks, which is just wrong. But there is a big problem with that. If you play via this route and you have not played down the American medium line yet, this tank will not unlock the 90mm gun for you on the T29. So you will either have to drop free XP on this thing, or play the T29 with that poncy little 76mm gun, which I do not recommend. If you play through this line, and you actually play the American Heavies, you get a good heavy at tier 5. The T1 Heavy, I had a lot of fun driving that. I didn't have as much fun with the M6, but it's basically more of the same. But this unlocks the 90mm gun, which will make your grind on the T20 a lot easier. So this is the route I actually recommend you take, unless you have already played down the American medium lines, in which case you do it in whichever order you want, frankly. Take whichever route you like. These are not bad tanks. Then you get to the T29 itself, and what will you actually have? What will the stock T29 look like? So, engines. You will not have any engine upgrades. You will be using the stock engine. Radios. You will not have any radio upgrades. You will be using the stock radio, stock turret. If you have not unlocked the 90mm gun, you will be using this terrible little excuse for a weapon. If you've unlocked the 90mm gun, life will be slightly easier for you. My recommended upgrade path would be, well, it's awkward. I would recommend getting the engines, but the problem is the middle engine is not much of an upgrade over the stock engine, and the top engine is an awful lot of XP, so my recommendation is actually get the 105 gun as soon as you can. Once you have the 105, worry about the engines and any suspension you have to get to mount things. Then get the top turret. The turrets are very similar. The top one basically buffs your guns and gives you a bit more view range. And then get the top radio, and then unlock the T32. This is not a massively painful grind. There are certainly worse in the game. I didn't find the grind too bad, and then you have a T29 fully unlocked. Equipment, crew skills, etc. I have your standard 3 sets of consumables. I can't really recommend any others, I don't think. Equipment, you can make a variety of different choices. I would recommend gun rammer, more DPM. The DPM on this gun is a little bit low if you use the 105, so gun rammer. Vents, not a bad choice, just makes the tank all round better. Vertical stabilizer, you will be moving a lot, so I would recommend taking that. The Americans are unusual. They get vertical stabilizers from tier 6, which means you can mount a vertical stabilizer at tier 7, which is nice. And what about crew skills? Well, it's a heavy tank. There's nothing really outstanding here to get surprised by. Sixth sense on your commander is never a bad idea. Safe storage on your loader is not a terrible idea, and repairs on everyone else. And you can see I've got repairs, and I'm training up brothers in arms, and thus it will continue. So, having said all that, I guess if we go and have a look at the armour scheme, then I'll show you some gameplay and then round things up as per usual. Time to talk about the defining feature of this tank, the armour. So, what we have is rear of the hull, garbage. Utter garbage, 51mm thick. Side of the hull, 76, still pretty damn horrible. Rear of the turret, 102. Surprisingly thick, but will be penned by most things. Side of the turret, 127. Surprisingly thick, but again, if it's a flat angle, most things will go straight through. Front of the hull, 102, which is not that great, but let's bear in mind that's thicker than you get on the Tiger, and it's sloped back at about 50 degrees. And this gives you a lower plate thickness, 70mm thick, sloped back at 45 degrees, giving you 91mm of effective armour, or the upper plate, 102, sloped back at about 50 degrees for effectively 140. This machine gun port is a weak spot, but generally speaking, most people consider the front of the hull of the T29 to be fairly weak, because of the turret. Now the turret, as depicted here, is not red all over, and so that may lead you to think, the turret of this thing isn't necessarily all that strong, but please bear in mind the actual number scale here that we are dealing with. And so, come on. That's it. And so, what we have here is, well, on paper it says that the front of the turret is 279mm thick, and there is a section that's 279. But it's quite a small section. So what you effectively have, if you're looking at the T29 straight on, is a bit of side armour, 127, sloped back at a stupid angle that it's never going to penetrate. Then a region of 178mm thick, sloped back at about 50 degrees and rounded, giving you like 260 odd effective armour around the sides. Then this massive great plug of gun mantlet, which with the turret armour gives you like 800mm effective thickness. 480, 279. I mean, it's 279 in its weakest parts. This gun mantlet is ridiculous. So, what you want to do with the T29 is just go hull down, poke your turret up, and giggle as you are immune to everything that comes anywhere near you. However, should point out, I should actually mention before we continue, these are not hitboxes. Shooting there won't do anything to you. So how can you hurt? If you have to shoot the front of a T29's turret, how can you actually hurt it? Well, number one, top part of the commander's cupola. 162, with a decent caliber gun, you can go through that. Right here, just above the gun mantlet, is a section that is effectively less than 200mm thick. So if you have a decent caliber gun, again, you can punch right through that. I mean, there are tier 8 tanks that can do that. Failing that, well, if his turret is at a slight angle to you, and you've got a good gun, you might be able to punch through these turret cheeks. But frankly, if you're shooting the front of a T29's turret, you're probably doing it wrong. I would suggest that you don't. So this block of 279 is actually, I think, right behind the gun mantlet in places. But that's basically not the armour value you're actually dealing with. But in short, the armour of this tank is primarily focused here on the front of the turret. Interesting point to note, however, while the sides of this tank are only 76mm thick, tracks cover quite a lot of it, so you can actually side scrape fairly effectively in this thing and have your tracks eat an awful lot of shells. But that is essentially the T29's armour in a nutshell. The front of the turret is amazing. Everything else is decidedly mediocre at best. But the front of the turret is amazing. Plus 10 degrees of gun depression just means you rock people's worlds. It's a lovely combination. So, let's get on with some gameplay. Here is game number 1. This is a tier 7 game, so we are top tier in the T29, and we are here on Sand River, and it's an assault game. Now, Sand River is a very nice tank. A very nice map for this tank, because with all these dunes and everything everywhere, you have a lovely opportunity to use your gun depression, go hull down, and just poke up your turret. And assault is definitely not a terrible game mode for this tank, because you can find places where, as you're going to see, you are basically the one breaching the enemy's defences and allowing your team to pour through. There is, however, a counterpoint to that. Because this map is so open, you do have to worry about enemy artillery, and you can see I say it in chat there. I know where I'm planning to go, and if the enemy... Okay, so if I was sitting in one of the enemy artillery pieces, I would be looking at our team composition and going, there's a T29 on the enemy team. If I were in a T29, I know which choke point I would go to and which choke point I would assault through. So I'm going to pre-aim at that location. So you do have to be a little bit careful. And the enemy have 2 artillery pieces, and they are both top tier, which is a little bit worrisome. But never mind, I'm going to do this anyway. Basically, my other option, other than doing this, would be to go to the ridge line at about F5 and try to get supporting fire in, because you want to remain hull down in this tank at all times. But that's not really using the fact that I'm a top tier heavy tank. That's not really pushing the pace of the battle enough for my liking. So, have a shot there at the M5 Stuart. Misses. I wasn't expecting it to hit. I just did it, you know, on the off chance, really. And here you can see this little rise just over here. We can poke up our turret, use our gun depression, and make the lives for the enemy teams quite difficult. There's an ARL V39, so I poke up just a little bit further. Oh, Tiger P, no, don't have shots on the Tiger P. So I poke up just a little bit more. There's a light tank that appears to have breached our lines, and aim and fire. I do actually take a shot there. Where does that hit me? That hits me on the top of the turret, so someone gets very lucky with their shot and basically manages to snipe my commander's hatch / turret top. By the amount of damage that I took, I would judge that it was probably the ARL. And there you go. Here comes the guns, here comes the guns. That was the Su-14-1, so I let my crew repair that. We're currently losing 0-3, which is slightly suboptimal. And I try and keep moving to make it difficult for artillery to nail me, but the T29 is not exactly the fastest machine in the world. KV-1 gets slammed for a lot of damage, but our artillery manages to kill the light tank that penetrated our lines. I think it's the one that penetrated our lines, maybe it's not. Either way, the scoreline is currently 1-4. Tiger P over there, but I don't have a good shot on him. ARL is getting quite a lot of fire directed at him. Tiger P is also taking some damage. I can't see anybody else over here, and I'm very conscious of the fact that we really need to be pushing. So, ARL V39, he's disappeared from view, but he didn't look like he was going anywhere, and he is dead. KV1 is over here as well, so I'm going to push up. Trying not to drive in a completely straight line, although I must confess I'm not wiggling anywhere near as much as I had wanted to, so that it makes shots for enemy artillery a little bit harder. And I want to try and close this distance to get a little bit behind this dune up here on the right hand side to make shots on me from artillery that much more difficult. There's the VK, there's also the Tiger P, and there's myself and a KV1 in the background. So, first shot goes into the side of the Tiger P. He's over-angled his tank, and I'm able to put a shot in the side there. Second shot, well, Tiger P is still over-angling his tank, so he's dead. Su-14-1 has another shot at me. I haven't yet been shot by the Crusader SP, so I'm wondering if it's just the Russian... There we go, I wiggle my turret to try and deny shots at my commander's hatch. I wonder if it's just the Russian machine that is firing at me. Put some damage into that KV-1S, and one of our artillery pieces finishes that guy off. I do, however, take a little bit of damage for my troubles. Kill off that VK3601H. We lose our 87 in the process to artillery though, and here's a KV-1, no match for a T29, shot into his turret, and we'll see if we can finish this guy off. KV-1, our KV-1 that is, dies, and we get the kill on the KV-1. And we push forwards. Now, there's half of this match is gone. The scores are currently 9-8, but this is pretty close. We've basically won this flank, but lost the other flank. And you can see we've taken a bit of a pounding doing so. See all those bounce marks? We took a couple of penetrating hits. Looks like possibly one straight through the gun mantlet where the gun is. Yeah, but nonetheless, we're doing okay. Try and get a shot on that Crusader SP. Don't know if that one hit or not. And I'm conscious now of the fact that my health pool is not the best. Nope, doesn't look like that shot hit the Crusader. And he's just running away. Fine, whatever. Now, considering what's going on in the rest of the battle on the map, I decide it is best to head for the enemy cap point. T-34. So I decide to go and sit in the capture point. Artillery has a shot at me but misses, and make the enemy come to me. I have that shot on the move, but we miss. Oh well, never mind. Their Tiger goes down, and this T-34 is trying to engage a Jagdpanther, which is perhaps not the best idea I've ever heard, but there we go. And somehow I bounce on the rear of a T-34 with a 105mm gun. The mind boggles sometimes, but there we go, these things happen. I get a little bit unlucky there, but never mind, he's dead, that's the point. So they've got two artillery pieces, an M6 and a Cheeto remaining. And I am conscious of the fact that I'm a slow tank, and I do not want to be chasing these enemy tanks all the way across this sodding map, because I just won't make it, we'll lose in the interim. There's the M6, and this is why I'm trying to force the enemy to come to us. You know, if it comes down to it, I will stay in the capture point and cap this one out. E25 saying, please win. Well, I will try. If this M6 has the balls to come around and try and deal with us, then we'll deal with him then. Base is captured, doesn't matter if I take any damage now. Put a shot into that M6, he puts one into me, but we've already won, who cares? And that was the game. So what we were doing there is using the gun depression and the frontal turret armour of this tank to batter our way up the 0 line in this assault game. And in that sort of situation, the T29 really shines. But again, weakness, well, I guess it's not really a weakness. Thing to bear in mind if you're driving this tank, do not just sit in the same position all the time, because enemy artillery will, if they have two brain cells to rub together, zero in on you, and they will make your life difficult. Anyway, that was game number 1 where we're top tier. Take a look at the post-battle results, then we'll do a switcheroo and we'll have a look at a bottom tier game. Alright, here we go. T29, tier 9 game. Ooh. Generally speaking, heavy tanks do not like being bottom tier. T54E1 says, can we do it? I say yes. Duh, of course we can do it. Doesn't mean we will. But we'll just have to wait and see what happens. So, trundle forwards time. Now I'm trying to go to the region at about sort of E4. to try and get myself hull down and put shots into people, basically. And you'll notice that I'm carrying 5 rounds of high explosive and 5 rounds of APCR. I didn't really use the APCR at all in the last game that I showed you. And you know what, I don't think I use it in this game either. In fact, in all the time I've been driving the T29, despite its dodgy accuracy, I don't remember ever firing a single round of APCR. And I'm still driving this tank, and yeah, I don't remember ever firing a single APCR round. It just didn't feel necessary. I mean, you get 198 penetration with the armor piercing, which goes up to 245mm of penetration with APCR for 320 alpha damage. Okay, so this is the sort of region I wanted to be in. See if I can get shots on people. Just poke my turret up. Be a little bit patient. Now in this game there is an artillery piece. It's the French Lorraine 15551. That's the one I've got. But as far as maps go, it is not as easy to hit people with artillery on this map as it was on the other map. And there's an enemy T29, and we put a shot into him and bounces return fire. Good start. So there's a Leopard prototype on the left hand side there, nice and soft and squidgy. Oh, there's also an E75. He could be problematic, so aim in on the commander's hatch, don't aim too long, get a little bit lucky, hit the commander's hatch flush, and put just under 300 damage into that E75. One of the most notoriously thickly armoured and badass tier 9 heavy tanks. Now I take a hit from the Leopard prototype there, who shoots me in the front by the look of it. You know, to be expected, but I did my thing, put another shot in, this time into the aforementioned Leopard prototype. Didn't roll particularly high, but then I'm not going to complain too much because the shot actually hit in the first place. T34, and I take a big old hit there from him and don't manage to hurt him in return. So that was a bad trade. He basically puts a shot straight through my front plate, my angled front plate, but then he does have a big old 120mm gun. So Leopard prototype is down, he got killed by an IS. Well, armour on a prototype's garbage, so that shouldn't come as a huge surprise. I've been reduced to just over 500 health. T54E1, that was a bad shot, it just aimed straight at his gun. I should have aimed a little bit off to try and put one through his turret, so that was my own bad gunnery. And there's lots of supporting fire coming in to hurt these guys, which is nice. T34 has managed to get himself tracked out there and he's getting properly worked over, which is good to see, and we're winning this game 3 kills to 0, having killed 2 tier 7s and a tier 9 of theirs. E50 comes around, oh, he puts a shot into me, again that looks like it's through the front plate. I put a shot into him, but that does now leave me a 1 shot for pretty much anyone and anything. In fact, no pretty much about it, I am a 1 shot for anything. Have a shot at the Super Pershing's weak spot there, but he backs off before I'm able to make it connect. And someone kills their T34, meaning that we are winning by 4 kills to 0. Aim a shot there at the weak spot on the Super Pershing, and we manage to land one. And you can see here that although the accuracy on the gun is not very good, provided you are not engaging at very long ranges, you can still aim for weak spots. And thus, this is a tier 9 game, and I have damaged tier 7, 8 and 9 tanks without firing a single round of premium ammunition, or any high explosive or anything like that. I've been firing armor piercing all the time. T50 has been tracked, but I do not want to go over there and shoot him because I would have to expose enough of my tank to make that a very dodgy prospect. And I put another shot through the top of the turret on the T26E4 Super Pershing, leaving him on quite low health. The Super Pershing has switched to firing high explosive, which damages my gun. So that's something you have to bear in mind. The T29 is all about hull down tactics, hiding your hull and giving them your turret to shoot at. That means that your gun gets knocked out every once in a while, and so the armourer skill on your gunner is not a terrible idea. I poke up here to aim a shot at the top of his turret. Alas, it misses. Super Pershing's on 124 health. And Super Pershing is down. And we're winning this 8-3. This looks like a pretty convincing victory is on the cards. Going to come around here and see if we can deal with some of the other enemy machines. Specifically, in this case, do something about this E50 who is harassing our ST1. But again, I'm being very cautious because I only have 115 health left. Object 704 is coming up behind him to deliver some butt love, leaves him on 39 health, and Tiger P finishes him off. There's a Black Prince up there, but no direct shots. Okay. We're winning this 11-5. There's only 4 of them left. So we try and move forward and just get as much damage and as many kills as we can before our team wins this, basically. This has now become an experience hunt. Object finishes off that Black Prince. And then there were 3. I'm saying, chat, love this tank. Now you might have noticed that the sort of gameplay we've employed in that game wasn't really any different to the gameplay we employed at tier 7. We just had to aim for weak spots a bit more. And basically the T29 doesn't play any differently in a tier 9 game compared to a tier 7 game. Your frontal turret armour was badass at tier 7, it's badass at tier 9. Your hull armour can be penetrated at tier 7, it can be penetrated at tier 9. Your gun is still pretty good. You know, you just have to aim for weak spots a little bit more. But it plays the same, it's the same tank. It really is one of those tanks that doesn't care too much about the matchup. So, IS-8 versus this object, I'm trying to give the guy a hand. Put a shot into the IS-8 and then back off. Get a bit lucky there when the IS-8 just tracks me, and I'll let my crew put that back on. Lower front plate of an IS-8. Yes, please. There goes another shot in. IS-8 fires, and I should reload before the IS-8 does. Now, I may not necessarily kill this guy. Alas, E75 kills him before I can put in the shot. That just leaves their T25 too. I don't think I'm ever going to get over there before he dies. Ooh, no, he is dead. He is so dead. So I just decided to sit in the capture circle and farm some cap points. And there we go, that's the game. So, a few things to point out there. 1, we ended up getting one of the highest damage counts in that game despite being a tier 7, i.e. a bottom tier tank in a tier 9 game. 2, it didn't really play any differently to how it plays in a tier 7 game. Not really. 3, we got a very high experience score for that because we were one of the highest damage dealers and we were hurting tanks higher tier than ourselves. However, look at the amount of base XP I got and then realise that this was only a first class mastery game, and that should give you an idea of how well people are playing in this tank. I would say that in any other tier 7, probably, that game would have been an ace tanker game. But this is the T29, it's not any other tier 7. This is a very, very good tank, and people generally play it very, very well. It's a keeper for many. So yes, have a look at the post-battle results, and then we'll slip back into the garage. So, what do I think about this tank overall? Well, as you may have noticed from the fact that I've actually bothered to give it equipment, if you're vaguely familiar with how I do my tank grinds at all, you will probably have already guessed that I am keeping this machine, and you would be correct. This is, in my opinion, by quite a large margin, the best, the most powerful tier 7 heavy tank. Possibly the most powerful tier 7 tank. It is definitely one of the best tanks, tier for tier, in the game. It is ridiculous. It chews up everything else. You can come up with idealized situations in which one of the others would beat it, but frankly, this is a monster. If I'm gonna be honest, it's probably too good. I'm not really sure how they would nerf it without completely killing it, but it is really good. It already is rather sluggish. It already has low DPM with that gun. The alpha damage is already alright, but not, you know, the alpha damage is good, but it's not absolutely outstanding. The gun's already very inaccurate. The thing that makes this is it's still a decent gun for the sort of ranges you tend to engage with in this thing, plus this monstrous turret. And if they were to nerf the turret too much, well, because back in the day, these little ears at the sides used to be hitboxes, and people just used to pen them. They buffed it by making them not hitboxes anymore, so people have to deal with the turret, and that just means this thing's ridiculous. But if they were to reintroduce the ears as weak spots, the turret would be almost worthless, and this tank would suck. So it's very difficult to see how Wargaming would effectively nerf this without completely killing it. It's as it stands, it's a very, 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 very strong machine, and it's an awful lot of fun to play. I mean, I don't think... Let's have a quick look at my stats in this thing. Now, I'm not saying this is a surefire guide as to how good a machine is, because, you know, you can have bad streaks, you can have good streaks, but I have a 68% win rate in this thing. I'm a average 53% win rate player. 717 average XP per battle, and I do not run a premium account. This is mental. The only tank apparently I've got higher average XP in is my Centurion. 1.53 damage ratio, 2.14 destruction ratio, armor use efficiency 0.91. It's just ridiculous. It's an incredibly powerful machine. Do I recommend this? Yes, I recommend this to everybody and their aunt. This is incredible. It's an amazing piece of kit. Sure, it has its problems, but it's very, very, very good. Yeah, it's better than the Tiger or the IS or whatever your other tier 7 heavy tank of choice is. Black Prince, I don't care. It's better than the lot. And I have probably too much fun playing this, so I'm keeping mine. And when it's on discount at some point, I'll get round to buying the T32. Anyway, that's basically everything I have to say about this. It's a monster. This is, I mean, if we're going to classify tanks by good, bad, all that, this goes beyond good and gets put in the team wrecker category. This is the sort of tank where its existence justifies the presence of artillery on its own, because if a T29 goes hull down and you are looking at it like that, ta-ra. Even if you're a tier 9, that can give you serious problems. You need a nice big high explosive shell landing down from the heavens to budge the thing. It's an incredibly powerful machine. But yeah, this is the first tank I think I've ever played that is going to have the title of Team Wrecker. If you leave this in a hull down position versus your team, it will kill them. It's fairly simple. They have to rush it, they have to get around it, they have to outnumber it and shoot it in the sides. If they don't do that, they die. Anyway, that's the T29, the monster that it is. I hope you guys enjoyed that review, possibly even found it vaguely informative. If you did, please feel free to catch some of my other videos and or subscribe to my channel, and I wish you very happy hunting on that battlefield. Ciao, ciao.